guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to film a video about how to go to university in a foreign country. I just finished my first year of design school in Barcelona. It's been an amazing experience so far, and I really wanted to share a bit about my process and how you can look into studying abroad and doing your university in Europe for yourself. I feel like growing up in the US, we don't really think that studying in another country is that much of an option. A lot of people do exchange trips, but to actually do your full degree abroad is something you may not have heard of or even know that you could do. It's really just about looking into options. If you have the chance to travel first, I definitely recommend taking time off before you jump into university. It definitely helped me get really clear on what I wanted to study and, more than anything, where I wanted to be. But if you don't have the opportunity to travel, there's still a lot of ways to look into options. The world is changing so fast and everything is more and more global. So as a young person, you just have the opportunity to do so many things that maybe 20, 30 years ago weren't even an option. There is an internationally recognized diploma that you can get. I'll link it in my blog post. But having a high school diploma is pretty much the equivalent, and a lot of schools will accept you just on that. You can also specifically look for American universities abroad or universities that accept American students. Lots of schools offer courses in English because it's such an international language. And some schools will offer a mix. So like what I did was start my classes in English, and then after 6 months I was able to switch to Spanish. It was a great way to transition, and it really wasn't that dramatic. Most of my professors spoke some English, most of my classmates spoke a little, so I could kind of ask questions, and everyone was so nice. Nobody ever judged me for not being able to say a word or missing something in my vocabulary. You also have to remember that your studies aren't actually primarily about the language, so if you're studying something like science or design, you're actually communicating in the language of your profession most of the time anyways. So even though becoming fluent in the native language is really important, if you have English as a base and you're committed to learning and growing, you can find a good balance and you'll learn so much just by being there. So research is definitely the first step, and then when you start finding some leads, just send out emails and ask them all your questions. When I was in Barcelona, I had the opportunity to go to design school in person. So if you're traveling and you have that chance, it's really cool to be able to see the campus and talk to the professors. But if you're not and you're doing everything digitally, there's still so many ways to get in contact. Like I mentioned, you can look for schools that specifically take American students, but even if there's something that looks really interesting to you, just send them an email and you never know. I found that in general, European schools are a lot less expensive than the US as well. So even though the scholarship opportunities are different, you can get a really good level of education. The school I found was also so much more specialized. So instead of being in a typical university, which could be a good option depending on your degree, you can also look for trade schools based on what you're really interested in. Again, that's where taking time off really helped me, because I never would have been sure what I wanted to study unless I took time to really look into other options. Basically, there's so many more options than you initially think. Once you find a school that accepts you, then you need to get your visa. I feel like this is another roadblock that often stops people from studying in another country. And yes, it can be really stressful, and anyone who's been through the process can definitely relate, but it's also so worth it. And the upside is it gives you the confidence that you can get a visa to live in another country and you can do it again, which is just such a cool perspective because it makes the world so much more open to you. At least in the phase of life I'm at right now, I feel like it's really about going places and figuring out my favorites and then figuring out a way to stay there. Not that you might not find your favorite place in your home country, but just that it doesn't need to be limited to that. Also, if you're studying somewhere for a few years, there's often a lot of ways to transition your study visa into a work visa and into residency, so you'll have the opportunity to stay on in the country after your studies. That's another perk as opposed to doing an exchange trip. I'm sure doing an exchange is an amazing experience, but at least what I found is I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to study for so much longer and really get to know a culture and settle into a place versus just being there and then leaving immediately. So yeah, the visa process can be super intimidating, but it's really just about staying organized and gathering all the documents you need. All the information is on the internet, So once you know what school you're going to, what country you're applying in, you can look up your specific situation, and someone has most definitely written a blog post that goes over the entire process. It's really helpful to keep a list of all the documents you need and when you need them by, just so you stay organized and it isn't stressful. It can still be stressful. There's definitely moments that will be stressful, but when you look back on it, you also realize that the stress wasn't necessary, and that what was necessary was level-headed organization and consistency, and that will 100% get you there. You can also hire legal help to get your visa. You can often pay a lawyer to help you gather all the documents and make the appointment with the embassy. It's a good way to guarantee that nothing will go wrong, but it's definitely not necessary. There are some fees involved as well, but nothing outrageous, generally just a fee for the actual visa, and then a few other things like health insurance, health certificate, and I had to get some documents translated by a sworn Spanish translator, which sounds like a lot, but when you get your visa and you go, it's so worth it in the end. Especially if you've decided to do all of your studies abroad, because you go through this whole big process the first year and then you have your visa. So then in the following years you just have to renew it, but the process gets easier over time and you get more comfortable with it. Just think of it as means to an end. Nobody likes bureaucratic documents, but if it gets you to the place you've always dreamed of living, it's 100% worth it. Some people recommend not buying your flights until you get your visa, just to be sure. But as long as you stay organized, I don't think there's any reason not to buy your flights ahead of time. Also, if you buy your flights 6 months or a year out, you can generally find really cheap prices. Everything is really crazy right now, and I don't know what countries are taking new applications, but I'm sure in the next 6 months, or at least in the next year, everything's going to be opening up again. So planning ahead is one of the best things you can really do right now. You don't have to be in a rush to do anything, but if you start looking into options and you give yourself a long-term plan, it makes it way more doable. So those are really the two main points. Look for a school that appeals to you, find out if they accept international students, and then go through the process of getting your visa. Obviously, that breaks down into a lot of little parts. You may not know what the right school for you is yet, but it's just a matter of looking into options. You can get so much information online now. Basically, every university and trade school will have their own website, and then you can also probably find forums from students, Facebook groups, places where people are having conversations, and you can kind of get a feel what the experience is like. I don't know if you follow her content, but my friend Dinara goes to a traveling university, Minerva, that's I think based out of the US, but she makes super cool videos throughout all of her studies, and I think it's been a really cool way for people to see that going to a traveling university is totally an option, which was something I never even knew about, and I'm from the US. I did consider doing it all online so I could model, but in the end I decided I really wanted to be in an in-person school just to have those relationships with professors and other students. Being exposed to different ways of life helps broaden your perspective, and I feel like I've grown so much as a person. It also helps with the language. I've learned so much more Spanish practicing with friends and living with flatmates that speak Spanish than I ever did studying. But the nice thing about having an international school is that my school offers courses in English and Spanish, so even if you're not fluent or comfortable in another language, you can still get started. I probably should have mentioned this earlier in the video, but my school is called IED, which is the Instituto Europeo de Diseño. They say it a bunch of different ways, and I'm in Barcelona, so they generally write it in Catalan. Basically, it's an international design university that's based out of Milan. They have campuses all over Europe and a few in South America. A friend recommended it to me and got me in contact with a student who was already there. So then I was able to ask some questions, realized they took international students, and just went for it. Having a direct contact is super helpful when you're looking into a school. But the cool thing about the digital world is it's way easier to connect with people. If there's a school you're interested in but you want more personal advice, you could even ask the representatives if they could get you in contact with some alumni or other students. You can also just look for people's social media, for YouTube channels or Instagrams, and just send them a personal message. People are so nice and they're so helpful when it's something they're passionate about, and they'll generally give you some really good advice. Like when I moved, I had no idea how I was going to find housing, and although there were residency options, it just wasn't for me. But I asked everyone I knew who lived in Barcelona what they would do, how they look for housing, and I got all the websites and apps that the locals use. It made it really easy to find a flat, and the first one I looked at ended up being perfect. So although Europe does offer residencies as well, there's a lot of other options for housing that will allow you to just figure out a situation that works for you. As far as my situation goes, I just finished my first year of design school in Barcelona. My degree is in interior design, and it's a 4-year program, so I go back in September. I don't think that Spain's currently accepting new applications for international students, but if you have a visa, you're allowed to re-enter the country to continue your studies. And I'm sure in the next 6 months to the next year, they will be opening up again. So I hope this video inspired you guys to look into international universities and feel like going to school in Europe is an option. Even though everything is really uncertain right now, what better time to start thinking about where you really want to go with your life and where you want to end up. And just start researching and reaching out to schools. If you want to check out my blog post, I'll link it in the description, and I'm going to offer a lot more resources on scholarships and different education options. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please give it a like and leave a comment if you have any questions or thoughts. I can definitely answer anything specific. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I release a new video every Friday and blog posts on Sundays. And follow me on Instagram if you want to connect and see more of my everyday life.